talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular.
Hi everyone, I go by the name Gray and I'm a self-taught artist currently going through the art fundamentals. Last week I completed 40 plus value studies in order to improve my understanding of how values correlate with composition. At the end of the week, I ended up spending about 3 hours or more compiling all that I learned into one piece. As you can see from near the start of the video, that piece of artwork was the result after doing those value studies. And am I satisfied with the result? Unfortunately not. My art definitely downgraded in its rendering quality, which was pretty discouraging. It didn't achieve the level of detail that I wanted, but I probably would have liked it more had I spent maybe 10 or 20 more hours on this piece, but honestly I stopped because I was brain fried. I was confused, overwhelmed. I didn't know how to continue, especially on how to render this particular artwork. It was pretty disappointing since I actually took 3 courses last week and I have gained a lot of new epiphanies when taking those courses. For some reason, I was expecting myself to render it and master this piece to the point that it turns out like one of those OG artists you see on Instagram. For example, I wanted to be at least half or more of the rendered quality you see from Guaze's recent work. And if you guys know Illumi on Instagram, I wished that my piece would achieve that particular level of style and skill. But honestly, these are incredibly high expectations for myself, considering that they likely spent years upon years perfecting their art style and skills. And I, for one, only took art seriously since last year in 2022. Over these past couple months and a number of months from last year as well, it can be hard to see your progress, especially after you learned something new or you have a bunch of new art tips that you wanted to apply to your piece. I've learned that especially when we are in the process of educating ourselves on something new to us, it is more probable for our art to look like it regressed. For example, the artwork that I first showed you completely and almost completely did not suit the ideal style that I was going for, and that's okay. I have to remind myself that I'm still a learning artist. I kind of relate my art journey, how we are first learning how to drive a car. Maybe we have watched a couple videos, took a few classes on how to drive, but once we actually sit down in the driver's seat and put our hands on the controls, we tend to be very clumsy in our first couple tries. And that is because, you have to keep in mind, your mind and hands are not really used to holding those different mechanisms in the car, and you haven't developed that hand and eye coordination that helps you maneuver the car in a very smooth manner. But when you've practiced driving for even 5 years, you don't have to think about every single movement anymore because it became second nature to you. So just like that, when we obtain new fundamentals, new art tips, it's like we're given new tools for us to work with, but we just don't have enough experience to use those new tools or tips to the best of their capabilities. Maybe all the fundamentals and art tips that I've learned last week has not fully become second nature to me, so everything seems overwhelming and clumsy in its execution. Just like how I may expect a regular bachelor's degree to be accomplished in about 2 years or 3 years after getting a college GE. I don't expect myself to attain the level of Nathan Fowkes, of Bobby Chu, Craig Mullins, Guays, Illumi, or any experienced and professional artist. The major factor that keeps you improving is maintaining that proactiveness, maintaining that diligence and unwillingness to give up, and also having set goals and dreams that drive you to continue. Before I continue, I'm excited to share one of the art courses I've taken that really gave me a lot of light bulb moments, and the artist just shared so many basic but mind-boggling tips that I feel like hasn't been talked about enough, but is so important when you are trying to build an appealing piece of work. And this specific course is called Intro to Photoshop and Values by Zach Retz. Zach Retz is a professional artist who worked in visual development and worked for companies like Disney, Sony, Netflix. He is now the creator and owner at Impetus Animation Past. He worked specifically in notable movies such as Spider-Verse and Puss in Boots. I could not recommend his course enough. It's a steal. Essentially, in his class, he talked about values, of course, and simplifying your values to only using down to 2 values and up to only 5 values. He demonstrated how it can be important to construct your values in a compositionally appealing way, and how important it can be to keep your values graphic and clear. Even with just your values, you can tell a story, and you can already bring your viewers' eyes to your points of focus. Those were some of the main things I've learned from his class. And also, quick tip, keep an eye out for any courses from your favorite artists. If you're on Instagram, for example, sometimes you have to dig through their feed as well, because they might not have promoted their art course enough. I've heard artists in general are not great at marketing their own stuff. I do too sometimes. You have to be a little shameless and confident when marketing to people. So, taking all that I've learned in Zach Retz's class on values, I took a bunch of photo references, paintings from master painters that I admired, and screenshots from movies or maybe TV shows, and I compiled it all into one page, as you can see on screen. I started off with only 2 values as Zach Retz instructed, and I basically tried to simplify each reference into 2 values in a graphically appealing way. From those, I really discovered what in those references make them so appealing to me. It became even more clear when I added the 3rd value and 4th and 5th value on select references that I especially was curious about. Sometimes when you learn something new, it's like you haven't really learned it until you applied it yourself, and that's how I felt when I did these studies. I heard Zach Retz just kind of talk about the importance of grouping your values, but it is only after I've studied them myself and tried to draw from the reference that I've discovered what specifically was it about those value groups that make it good. I don't know, guys. I've bought and taken a good number of art courses throughout my self-learning art journey, and trust me when I say this course is like one of the top courses that I would recommend. So about my final weekly piece of artwork that I've shown you from last week, as you can tell, I kept the lines really loose. It became pretty simple, What I tried to do was use a photo reference, and I tried to heavily manipulate the shapes into appealing compositional value groups. I utilized the concept of big, medium, and small, and arranged it near the foreground of the piece, as you hopefully can see right now. I used the concept of the tunnel or keyhole shape to bring the viewer's eyes to the focal point. So at the center of this drawing, hopefully you can see that it's composed of one light and one dark value, and the dark value is basically in a circular shape surrounding the smaller light value inside it. It brings the focus to the shapes inside that dark value. Throughout this piece, I've also tried to utilize the concept of shape language. So you can see that the main shapes I've used are round circular shapes and square-like shapes. What I mean by that is that the objects, big or small, down to the leaves and up to the main value groups, they are all either small or big depictions of circles or round shapes and squarish shapes. It maintains a certain cohesiveness to the entire drawing and makes each object seem like they belong in the same world. If you have seen one of my previous videos, I talked about how I struggled with shape language. So I tried to make more rounded shapes more dominant in this piece compared to the more squarish shapes. And I think it maintains a sense of hierarchy and less chaos. Plus, rounded shapes in general make a piece more peaceful. To convey the feeling of wind, I wanted to introduce a kind of flow that hopefully you can feel when you look at the drawing. In terms of color and temperature, I wanted this drawing to feel dominantly warm, but slightly cool. So in the end, I think this artwork became around 60 to 65% warm, and the other part was cool. So as you can tell, I was trying to compile all the art fundamentals and art tips that I learned into one piece. And I also want to share a really good art tip in terms of the color green. I've heard from other artists that green is actually one of the harder colors to master. It's kind of funny because I learned a really valuable art tip by just listening to two traditional artists banter about this and kind of complain about it in a recorded live stream. And they were kind of talking about how the color green is harder to deal with because it changes temperature so fast. For instance, if you pick a shade of green on the color wheel and put it down, and then you wanted to choose a different hue of green, so you picked a color that leaned more towards yellow or blue. In doing that, even if you leaned that new color just a little bit towards those different hues, the temperature of the green that it turns out to be will have a significant enough of a change of temperature so that it's like you're risking introducing too many chaotic temperatures in your drawing, something like that. So knowing that the color green behaved that way, I was able to use that to my advantage. Before, I came to really not like using the color green, but now that I know this fact, green has become probably one of the colors I enjoy more and more. You know, after doing 40 plus value studies, I really wanted this piece to do well. But, you know, as learning artists, I think we have to get used to failing, but failing fast. That's part of the reason why I didn't continue more into this piece, because all that I would probably be doing was rendering for the most part. Essentially, I think I was able to compile a rough representation of all the different art tips that I learned over the many months I've been learning art, and in that regard I can say that this piece was not a complete failure. But alas, after this drawing I was really kind of down and in my mind, maybe when I woke up the next couple mornings, I was like, bruh, you can't have an art career, you know? So it was pretty discouraging. But I didn't want to give up completely because of the specific goals I want to accomplish. So I continued to tackle the color green. I continued to tackle the overwhelming subject of foliage as well, and tried to do another study using one of the value studies I did prior. Now that I've realized that I, in a way, had a terrible time figuring out how to introduce more details into my drawings after what I learned, I decided to do a value study where I try to refine that area of my art again. This week, I took a value study I really was curious about and I added color to it. So hopefully you can see more intricate details being introduced, and you know, by building up on all the principles that I've learned, again, just like how I said in the last video, I can figure out more and more what is my art style. So when you're practicing fundamentals, also keep in mind that these studies aren't just studies, but there are studies that really can be a catalyst for you to accelerate your confidence in your art style. In conclusion, I'm grateful that I spent as much time as I did to study value and composition, because I can really resonate with this concept and I can really envision where it can take me in my future artwork. The final piece that you see on screen in this video is still not close to my ideal kind of rendering and style, but I can see through the studies I did and the progress I made that I'm getting closer and closer. So hopefully next time when you see me, I will show you an even better piece of work. I have a really specific piece I want to make next time I post, so please stay tuned. I'm not really studying the fundamentals in it anymore. I'm applying much of the stuff I learned into one big illustration, so I'm excited to show you guys if I can. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope this channel really serves as a place of motivation for any fellow artist still learning or just needs something to listen to. I wish everyone the best. Remember to give a thumbs up before you go if you liked my video. Happy painting, everyone. Bye-bye.